Well, hey guys, and welcome back to Maine Fish and Wildlife for a little more remote learning today. We've been talking about the values of wildlife and how we define these creatures, and they obviously have value to us here in North America. We can tell that by how much money and time is spent on conservation and maintaining this resource of wildlife and natural habitats on our landscape, more so than a lot of other corners of the earth. And it's a pretty cool story. And along with that story, there's some depressing stuff, but there are also a ton of really amazing success stories in conservation and in wildlife all across North America. And today we're going to pick one in particular that to go through and learn about the kind of amazing story behind one management success story here in North America. And then we'll finish up with you picking a species of your own, a once very rare creature that is now very common and maybe right even in our backyards, to do a little research on and get a little more familiar with. So let's jump right in here. For class today, I'm going to talk about a very famous North American mammal. It's our largest North American land mammal, the American bison, aka buffalo. Now, bison in North America at European contact, we think once numbered 30 to 60 million individuals. And if you read the accounts of some early explorers, they're talking about areas of the plains with bison as far as the eye could see, and these massive dust storms kicked up by these roaming herds. Just really, really cool stories of an amazingly large herd of North American bison that roamed the plains, essentially from just a little east of the Mississippi way out to the Rockies. And they were a really critical food source for Native Americans and all kinds of other large predators that roamed the American prairies. Now, as I said, they are the largest land mammal in North America. They're heavier in weight than a moose even, and adult males can weigh in excess of 2,000 pounds. So they are a huge, huge creature. Now, eventually, in a couple weeks, we're going to talk a little bit about the various eras of wildlife management in North America, and I'm going to take us through those eras here with the bison. And we're going to begin shortly after European contact, or during the Industrial Revolution, late 1800s, after the Civil War. We have the railroad moving west, bringing Europeans west in large numbers, where they are encountering massive numbers of all wildlife, including the American bison. By 1884, there was about 325 bison left in all of North America. That's down from 30 to 60 million. And that's a crazy number to think about, okay? And we're talking about a small herd of about 25 individuals in Yellowstone. And those 325 bison were really broken up into these tiny little herds that had somehow avoided the European slaughter. That image you're seeing there is of a market hunter sitting on a pile of hides. Those are all buffalo hides that were being salted and prepared to ship off to Europe, where they would have been tanned to make fine buffalo leather. Now, buffalo were not really worth anything until some modern tanning practices finally found a way to take that really thick hide and turn it into some really high-end leather. And at that point, they became a pretty critical target. These market hunters would have had their own company. It would have been one shooter, 2 or 3 cutters. They would have shot dozens of buffalo a day, and they would have skinned them and taken the hide and left the rest there to rot. Remember, they had no modern refrigeration. They had no way of preserving this meat. A lot of times they would take the tongue, because they could sell that locally for meat, but most of the meat from the bison was left to go to waste. The prairies are said to be, they at the time were just covered with the bones of bison, which were later picked up to use in bone meal and all kinds of other things. But yeah, the market hunting for these bison is really, really crazy the more you read about it. And one of the craziest things I think about with this era of overexploitation was our initial reaction to these bison becoming very, very rare. Now, this is late 1800s. People are recognizing that bison are disappearing from the face of the earth, and in an effort to document these for future generations, there were museums being set up with mounts of big game animals to kind of show future generations what these creatures looked like, because the assumption was, you and I would never know what a bison looked like because they would have been long extinct by the time we exist. So there's a few different famous names in conservation, like Theodore Roosevelt, who helped start the Boone and Crockett Club to work on conservation, and then James Hornaday, who was a naturalist and ran the Smithsonian Museum, I believe. Now, imagine nowadays, there's 25 of these creatures left in Yellowstone. We would be surrounding them with the National Guard and protecting them. But at the time, there's no internet, there's no phones. Nobody really knows if bison even exist anymore. So there were hunting parties sent out to find the last bison. And the craziest part is, if they were to get lucky enough to find the last remaining herd of bison, their orders were to shoot them because the museums wanted those last specimens. They were desperate for a specimen, just assuming that they would go extinct. Kind of depressing to think about, and a way different reaction than we would have today over a really rare creature. Now we jump ahead to about 1905, we form the American Bison Society. This is a group of people who really loved American bison, wanted to protect them. We began protecting habitat. We stopped the hunting of bison altogether, and we started moving bison around the country and reintroducing small herds. And it worked. We've brought bison back from the brink of extinction. They're by no means common today. Today we have between 20 and 25,000 wild bison roaming North America. Nowhere near that 30 to 60 million number, but it's a lot better than 325. And then we have another 250,000 or so in private herds, and those are bison that are being raised by farmers for meat. Remember, our wild bison, some states do have these very limited lottery systems for like a hunt for a wild bison. There's a handful of states where you can do that. But you could go right to Hannaford and Saco and buy bison meat, and that is by no means a wild bison. That would be a creature that was raised on a farm for its meat, and that's one that would count towards that 250,000 in those, quote, private herds. So one of the other craziest aspects of this whole deal to me is that nowadays, even all of our wild bison, if you check their genetics, there are very few left in North America that are pure bison. By that I mean they have nothing but American bison genes. The majority of them have tiny amounts of cow DNA in them. And that's because we got to such a genetic bottleneck back there in the 1800s with 325 left on Earth, that there were people at the time who were trying to breed what they thought would be the ultimate meat animal. This would have been a creature that grew fast and made a lot of meat, but was also hardy and could live in the wild, and you would only have to just go out and harvest them every now and then. They wanted the attributes of a cow and the attributes of a bison. So they were crossbreeding cattle and bison, and they were creating these crazy animals called a beefalo. And in fact, to this day, there are still cow genes in a lot of our wild bison around the country. Tiny trace amounts of DNA, nothing you can really notice. It doesn't change the appearance of these wild bison at all. But they do have these bovine genes in them because of that quest to create the beefalo back in the day, and it never really worked out. But you can Google pictures of it. There are pictures of beefalo around, and it's pretty crazy to think about that mission even happening. So just an interesting story we see, during the era of overexploitation. We see originally the era of abundance, tons of bison on the landscape, the era of overexploitation, we overharvest them, we destroy their habitat, all kinds of bad things happening. We realize the error of our ways and we begin to work to fix that during the era of protection. And then nowadays, with these efforts to sustain wild bison and protect them, we're hopefully we'll have bison on the landscape forever. So it's a classic story that we can fit the same storyline into tons and tons of other species in North America, and some that would really surprise you. So our goal today is to work on an assignment called the American Wildlife Management Success Story. This is posted in Google Classroom for you, and all you're going to do here is pick one of the species listed there, either the pronghorn antelope, the wood duck, peregrine falcon, white-tailed deer, wild turkey, black-footed ferret, elk, or the bald eagle. Pick that species, do some research, and see if you can find the lowest known population estimate. Some of these are going to be really hard to find a solid number. Other ones you'll find it. Sometimes you just have to say very rare. In the case of the black-footed ferret, spoiler alert, they were once listed as extinct. We thought they were gone forever and then stumbled upon some. That's an interesting story there. Then see if you can find that current population estimate. And here I'm looking for a sentence or two, where you list the species' important habitat requirements. I'm looking for things more specific than woods. Okay, I'm looking for you to explain to me, what does each of these species need to thrive? And they all have their own unique habitat requirements. And I want you to use this question to show me that you've done your research. I can tell very quickly who's actually read a little bit about their species and who hasn't by the way they answer these questions. Give me a short list of the reasons for the original population decline. With bison, for example, we said they were overhunted, they were losing habitat, but really overhunting was the largest culprit with our bison. And then finally, what are the strategies or policies we put in place that allowed this species to come back? Did we protect them? Did we protect their habitat? Did we, were conservation groups formed specifically for that one species? Did we breed them at federal facilities? Like, what was going on? Show me again that you did some research on your species. And to make your life a little bit easier, I've gone back and found some interesting YouTube videos on each species. Some of these YouTube videos are better than others. Some of them will share with you all the answers you need for this assignment. Other ones don't. So just know some are better than others, but all of them will give you a pretty good start on the background for your species. So I suggest maybe that as a starting point. Pick your species you're most interested in and jump in and check that YouTube video out, and then do any further research that you may need. As always, hit me up with an email if you have any questions, and I will see you guys in person next time. Thanks a bunch for tuning in.